Hi guys, this is Damir, aka not Arnie, and initially I wanted to
Get to the chopper!
but then I decided to do this video review of the Nexus 5 instead. Before I will start this review, I just wanted to make myself clear. If I mention things I don't like that much about the device, I'm definitely not bashing it. I'm just pointing out flaws, and this has two reasons. The first one is, it's just a bad habit of mine and I can't help it. The second one, I don't want anyone to say he wasn't aware of this or that, so he would have possibly thought about twice buying the device after he saw my review. But enough of this, let's continue with the review. As usual, let's begin with a quick unboxing. Let's continue and take a look at the design and the build quality here. If you take a look at the front, you will see a black slab with the circular earpiece, the front facing camera and the usual sensors. There's nothing else to see otherwise. Personally, I like this clean and minimalistic design elements a lot because there's nothing to distract from the phone's experience otherwise. On the left side, all you can see is the volume rocker. On the right side, there is the power button and the SIM card tray. More about the duct tape a bit later. At the top you will see the headphone jack and the noise cancelling microphone, and if we take a look at the bottom we will find a micro USB port, the speaker on the left and another microphone on the right hidden beneath something that looks like another speaker but isn't. At the back you can see the 8 megapixel camera and the LED flash. The finish on the black model is soft touch and feels pretty premium, but for someone with dry hands like me it also comes with a grain of salt. Dry hands and this soft touch finish turn out to be a pretty slippery thing. Holding the device safely can be quite tricky, and I was always in the fear of having it slip out of my hand. That's why I decided to cover the back with duct tape, which provided me the necessary grip until my debrandt skins arrived to finally provide me a nicer looking solution for more grip. But I also had to use duct tape as a temporary solution to fix my rattling power button. I have already shown in my first impressions video. I know there's a fix for it, but it involves opening up the device, what I just don't want to, and I also don't want to return it just because of that, because it's otherwise pretty much flawless. The buttons are made of ceramic, they feel pretty nice even though they are quite sharp, maybe even a bit more than they should have to be. But it's not really an issue, you get used to it pretty quickly. One thing it took me a bit longer to get used to was the unnecessary rough and sharp edge along the front of the display. It doesn't really feel smooth, they could have definitely made it a bit rounder to make it more comfortable when sliding along the edge. Especially for someone like me who uses bezel swipes all the time to navigate, it took quite some time to get used to, but even then it was never as nice as on a more rounded edge like on the HTC One X that has a nice little curve to the side. Personally, I think the button placement to be pretty bad. The power button is positioned way too low and the volume rocker just feels to be on the wrong side, but maybe that's just me. In general the device feels pretty nice though. It isn't maybe the most comfortable phone in the hand due to the edgy design elements, but it's definitely solid and premium. But the device is also pretty light with its 130 gram. This kinda lets it feel less substantial and sturdy, something a first drop test on YouTube shows off pretty clearly, so maybe you want to consider a good case to keep it protected. My conclusion for now is, it looks better than it actually feels, what doesn't mean it feels cheap or bad in any way though, but it just isn't the most comfortable phone to hold, so that's why it just gets a halfway thumbs up from me. Let's head over and take a closer look at the display. The Nexus 5 has a 5-inch 1080p screen which takes up the biggest part of the front. The display is very bright and definitely more than suited for use in broad daylight. It is also very sharp due to its high resolution, so brightness and sharpness are definitely top notch here. The rest of the display isn't that good though. Blacks could definitely be a bit better, especially in dark rooms and some specific angles this gets quite obvious, but you won't really notice it under normal lighting conditions. But if you are used to AMOLED screens you should definitely check it out before buying. The colors seem to be more on the neutral side, not saturated in any kind for sure. Some could maybe even call them slightly washed out. This gets quite obvious compared to other phones with more saturated colors like the One X. But using the Nexus 5 for a few days you will quickly get used to it, so the colors of the One X will look totally oversaturated after using the Nexus 5 before. I would wish for a little bit more punch and the colors to be a bit more vivid, but that's a personal preference after all, because they usually seem to be quite realistic still. Let's quickly mention viewing angles here. They are far from bad, but also not the very best either. The quality of the screen stays pretty nice intact if you tilt the device horizontally or vertically. Only tilting the device in 45 degrees angles ends up in washed out pictures, with a black almost being white. That's not serious since that's no angle you usually look at, and it's also mostly noticeable with very dark background in very dark rooms. In normal light you won't even notice this at all. Please don't get me wrong, the whole display description of mine sounds way worse than it is. I'm complaining on a very high level here. Most of the drawbacks are only noticeable in dark rooms, but not at all in normal light. Also, the whole rest of the display in general is way more than just okay. It's a really pleasurable experience overall. It offers a sharp, nicely color balanced picture that knows to handle everything well, even though it can't set any highlights in any criteria either. All in all, definitely a clear thumbs up. We covered the display, now it's time to check the sound. Using the headphone jack you will get a really good experience. The sound is rich and provides a nice amount of details. Using an equalizer you can easily get even more out of it to further improve your listening experience. Same thing isn't the fact for the speaker though. The volume itself is okay, loud enough for ringtones and such, but it's not really suited for sophisticated media consumption. The bass is only present if you hold the device correctly so the sound gets properly reflected. In mid-air it's almost completely absent though. The mids are mostly okay, but the treble can get quite harsh, especially on max volumes, and the sound starts to distort pretty quickly. I checked videos and games as well as music. Simple YouTube videos work quite well, music also as long as you don't crank up the volume too high. Games feel less exciting though, it just lacks in volume here to provide a high-end experience. I've did a few samples and comparisons so you can get a better feel for it. I also used a custom kernel to boost the volume, trying to improve the sound experience. I'll just let you alone with these now for you to decide. Okay, you got a few impressions now and I hope they were a bit helpful here. Overall, I can't give it more than a sideways thumbs here, since it's definitely a weaker part of this phone. Now is the time to show where the Nexus really knows to shine, the performance. Sporting a Snapdragon 800, it is able to easily handle everything you throw at it. Scrolling is extremely smooth and also pretty consistent. Lag seems to almost be a thing of the past. It really only happens rarely and mostly just noticeable for the trained eye. To my surprise, Chrome has gotten extremely smooth lately, even though it still can't completely compete with WebKit based browsers. But the gap is closer than ever and the difference is really marginal by now. So the browsing experience is extremely pleasant either way. Loading times seem still to be a bit longer though on Chrome. But longer sounds too harsh considering the rendering almost happens instantly on the Nexus 5. Lag is really almost entirely down to as long as the site is still loading, and that is quick in general, so it's not really worth mentioning. Besides that, apps like Twitter clients run perfectly smooth and fast, and even Google Plus is smoother than ever before thanks to the latest update that dramatically improved the app's performance. I've never seen Google Plus as fast, smooth and lag-free before. The whole experience in terms of performance is hands down the best I've ever experienced. I am saying this after using the Sony Xperia Z1 that also used the Snapdragon 800. This must be due to the optimizations of Android 4.4 KitKat and pure vanilla Android, I'd guess. So, to no surprise, it's a thumbs up, a double one as a matter of fact. The same goes for the gaming performance. All games ran smooth as I ever saw them before. If there's a game that doesn't run well, I highly doubt there's any other device where it runs well at all. Yes, after some extent of playing time the device starts to throttle, but the Snapdragon has so many power reserves, every game stays still playable and you most probably won't even notice the throttling ever at all. thumbs up definitely here as well. Let's switch from gaming performance over to the camera performance. I've already said it in my Xperia Z1 review. I'm no camera enthusiast and I see myself more as a casual photo shooter, so keep that in mind. And maybe that's why I can't fully understand all the sort of bad press the camera gets. Sure, it maybe isn't the best one out there, but it's far from bad. Pictures in good lighting turn out pretty impressive in my opinion. Sometimes they could be slightly sharper, but most of the time they turn out quite nice. Color seems to be pretty accurate and the contrast as well. Low light performance could use a bit improvement though, but therefore I found the pictures taken with LED flash to turn out very good, very sharp and very crisp. Maybe not with true to life colors anymore, but still very nice to look at. One weaker point that should be mentioned for sure is the really slow capturing of photos. It sometimes takes up to 2 seconds to shoot a photo. Yes, it mostly turns out good, maybe even because of that. This is definitely not really suited for quick snapshots. Photos taken in the HDR Plus mode turn out really impressive. That's why I would even recommend to use that always if you have the time to wait a bit longer. But since the usual mode needs quite some time, why not just wait an extra second and getting a way better result as a reward. The video performance is great as well. The autofocus works well, it could be a bit faster though. The video turns out sharp and smooth, while recording though it still looks very choppy, same as it was on the Z1. I don't really know for sure what the reason is for that, but it really isn't a big thing in my opinion. To sum it up, the Nexus 5 offers way more than just average picture taking qualities and even slightly better video taking performance. The camera should definitely please all casual photographs easily. After all, it's a Nexus. If you're looking for serious camera performance, you are maybe not in the right place after all. But for all the others it should be more than just okay, so thumbs up here as well still. Now it's finally time to check the software. For a lot of people this seems to be the even more important part than the hardware. I beg to differ here, but be that as it may be. Sure, the software is important, but I think the Nexus 5 wouldn't have been any less spectacular with Android 4.3. Sure, 4.4 has a ton of small nice improvements, but Android was great as it was after all. Things I like about 4.4 are the design changes away from the hollow blue towards grey and white. I didn't really care much for the new praised Google launcher though. Honestly, I didn't even use it for longer than it took me to switch to Nova. Yes, it is maybe the best launcher Android ever offered before out of the box, and it will do just fine for most people. But if you ever use the third-party launcher like Nova, it's almost impossible to ever go back to stock again. If you don't need all the customization options of those launchers and their extra features though, the stock launcher should suit you very well if you don't mind the new humongous icons. New features like lock screen artwork are nice, but nothing groundbreaking though. The new improved dialogue features like caller ID sound great, but also won't work in most countries from my experience. 4.4 offers a new keyboard featuring emojis, but the keyboard is available now in the Play Store and no KitKat exclusive feature anymore. Immersive mode sounds like something that could turn out great, but for now in the current implementation it seems kinda wrong or still buggy in my opinion. But overall, it's more the minor and subtle changes like the refined font and toast messages that make 4.4 so great and not just the bigger ones, even though it's nice to have them as well. Android 4.4 improved in almost any aspect, not just performance and design, so there's nothing else for me to say than just a big thumbs up here again. The last and maybe most important part, maybe even concerning thing I would like to talk about is the battery life. And especially because of that I will take a very close look at it, since I think most other reviewers mention this important part way too briefly. Let's start with the empty battery. Starting from that, a full charge needs pretty exactly 2 hours. Give it a few more minutes just to be safe. And this is when the battery performance has to show what it's capable to. I read a lot about inconsistent performance here. I can't confirm such a thing. For me it was pretty consistent throughout the whole time. Here is what you can expect in general, but please keep in mind everyone's mileage may vary. I'm just sharing my results as an example. I usually tend to have a bigger drain in usage than most others for some reason, so here we go. Completely on Wi-Fi I managed to get about 5 hours of screen on time over the course of 9.5 hours with 9% battery still left, so at least 5 to 6 additional hours of standby time left to drain. In more mixed usage with about 50% on Wi-Fi and 50% with mobile data, I always ended up with close to 4 hours of screen on time and enough standby time to get through the day, but not really with any reserves for more after that. I'm not sure how a full day on data would turn out, since I'm usually not longer than 10 hours on data at once, but I assume it should be good for at least 3 solid hours, maybe even 3.5 hours of screen on time and about 12 hours of standby time. It's up for you to decide if that's good enough for you or not. Personally, I'm pretty confident it will be for me. Just as a comparison, my old One X was out of battery at about 2 hours screen on time and 50 hours of standby. Sure, I would have preferred a bigger battery because battery life is one thing that can never be good enough, but I think it should be good enough for most people. So that's why I give it at least a halfway thumbs up. I think it's finally time to draw the line and see what we've got. I'm aware of the fact that the review in certain parts sounds way too critical, but don't get me wrong, just because I have some minor things to complain, that doesn't mean the end result is bad by any means. So what are my final thoughts on the Nexus 5? Nothing is really extremely outstanding, not the build quality, the feel in the hand, nor the battery or the speakers. But also nothing on this device is really bad, quite the opposite I'd even say. The performance is class leading at the moment, the screen is beautiful, bright and very satisfying. The camera performance finally noticeably above average, and being a Nexus you are always on the safe side for the newest update of a pure bloat-free amazing version of Android. The weaker parts to mention would be the speakers and the battery life for real hardcore users and road warriors. All in all, it is an extremely well-rounded and well-polished device, being a more than worthy successor to the Nexus 4 that offers an unbeatable price-performance ratio if you happen to live in the right country. But even if you would have to pay full price as for other flagship devices, their money would be spent well. It's really hard to beat the Nexus 5 as the total package as it is. There are some other better ones in certain areas, but it will hard to find one as versatile and well balanced as the Nexus 5. Another extremely important bonus of the Nexus line is the custom ROM and XDA support, superior to all other devices available. If you are into routing and roaming, it is almost impossible to ignore the Nexus 5. Personally, this is one of the major reasons for me to buy the Nexus 5 after all. And that's why the complete Nexus 5 package gets his well-deserved 2 thumbs up, because I just don't see any real alternative that can beat the Nexus 5, especially if you love pure unadulterated Android. So that's it for my Nexus 5 review. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them. Please reshare this video and give me a thumbs up if you liked the video.